I have chosen the feminist art movement of the 1970s for my Sociology 1 final project. This movement was not just a group of artists, it was a powerful collective of activists and visionaries who came together to challenge and redefine the entrenched gender roles within the art world and society. The 1970s feminist art movement emerged as a vigorous response to systemic inequalities faced by women in the art community. Women artists were often pushed to the margins, underrepresented in exhibitions and galleries, and their work undervalued. This led to significant cultural upheaval, spearheaded by iconic figures like Judy Chicago, Cindy Sherman, Faith Ringgold, and many more. Their mission? To shatter the glass ceiling that had confined female artists for centuries. But why focus on the group rather than individual achievements? The answer lies in the incredible synergy of this movement. The feminist artists of the 70s realized that collective action was far more powerful than isolated efforts ever could have been. They formed groups and cooperatives like Guerrilla Girls and the Women's Building, pooling resources, ideas, and energies to effectively challenge the status quo. Their diversity was their strength. Artists from varied backgrounds and disciplines brought a rich tapestry of perspectives to the table. Innovative art forms and techniques like performance art, body art, and conceptual art became their tools for change. These new approaches allowed them to express their messages in groundbreaking ways, pushing the boundaries of traditional art and femininity. The movement also understood the power of visibility. Through exhibitions, meetings, and publications, they amplified their voices and reached audiences far beyond the confines of galleries and museums. My research question is what factors of the feminist art movement of the 1970s contributed to its success in challenging traditional gender roles in the art world? By exploring this, we can understand how collective action, diverse perspectives, innovative approaches, and strong advocacy can lead to significant social and cultural change. Before the feminist art movement, the art world was a clear reflection of wider societal norms and biases. It was a realm where gender inequalities were starkly visible. The art scene was overwhelmingly male dominated. This dominance was not just in terms of artists who gained recognition, but also in those who held decision-making positions in galleries, museums, and academic institutions. Such a skewed representation meant that the narratives and artwork celebrated and displayed were largely through a male lens. A woman's presence in art history was minimal, and when present, it was often in secondary roles. Art itself often mirrored societal gender stereotypes, with women depicted in passive, decorative, or domestic roles, while more dynamic, active representations were reserved for the men. Educational and professional opportunities in the arts were also heavily gendered. This exclusionary practice further entrenched the gender disparities in the art world. But how did this situation come to be? The answer lies in the process of socialization, as discussed by Professor Braun in Lecture 17. Socialization is the process through which individuals internalize the norms, views, and authority relationships of their society. It's a three-step process. First, society decides the important distinctions to code. Second, these distinctions are coded and roles are assigned. And third, individuals learn and internalize these roles. In the context of gender, society assigns labels based on perceived distinctions. The first thing often asked about a newborn is their gender, which is not always synonymous with their biological sex. Gender roles are the societal norms and views associated with these gender differences, dictating what is deemed appropriate behavior or pursuits for each gender. The socialization process was pivotal in creating the art world as it existed before the feminist art movement. The art world structure and its biases were a direct result of societal norms that dictated gender roles and expectations. Women's roles were narrowly defined, limiting their opportunities and representation in the art world. The feminist art movement, therefore, was not just challenging the art world. It was challenging deeply ingrained societal norms and the process of socialization that had perpetuated gender disparities for centuries. They encouraged critical reflection on the ways society constructs and enforces gender norms, paving the way for a more inclusive and equitable society. Their goal was to create a society where individuals are free to express their identities without being confined by rigid gender expectations. Women in the art world catalyzed change, and how this change was repelled was because of the spread of information and ideologies, leading to a significant shift in gender roles. This segment draws on Professor Braun's Lecture 24, which discusses the mechanics of social change. Women artists recognized the pressing need for a shift. This was not a spontaneous realization, but a gradual change that was fueled by the passing of information. Professor Braun used the metaphor of a bridge to explain how a network diffuses information across different social groups. In the context of the feminist art movement, these bridges facilitated the flow of feminist ideas and critiques of the art world's gender biases to previously disconnected or unaware communities. The concept of simple diffusion describes how one individual can influence another at a certain rate. This influence becomes especially potent when it concerns behaviors that require reinforcement, such as participating in a movement or embracing ideas that challenge pre-existing norms. The feminist art movement, much like other social movements, required an accumulation of these individual influences to gain momentum. As highlighted in lecture, for more complex ideas and behaviors, like those advocated by the feminist art movement, a combination of weak ties and a critical mass is essential. Individuals have a threshold, and often need to hear information from a fraction of their network before adopting new ideas or behaviors. This concept underscores the importance of both strong and weak social ties in spreading the feminist art movement's ideologies. The role of social change is fundamental in understanding the success of the feminist art movement. Social change implies a significant alteration of group norms, views, roles, and relationships. Throughout history, we've seen such changes with the rise of capitalism, the scientific revolution, and the rise of the nation-states. These changes are often a result of tensions within existing ideas and systems, technological innovations, and even warfare. Applying these concepts to the feminist art movement, we see a similar pattern. The movement succeeded because it reached a critical threshold where enough individuals were willing to challenge and redefine existing gender norms in the art world. This threshold sequence cascade, where one person's acceptance of new ideas leads to another, created a domino effect. As more people in the art community, both women and men, began to recognize and challenge the gender biases, the movement gained unprecedented momentum. The feminist art movement's success in challenging traditional gender roles in the art world was a result of a well-orchestrated diffusion of ideas and ideologies. By reaching a critical mass and utilizing both strong and weak ties within their networks, these pioneering women managed to create a cascading effect of social change, fundamentally altering the landscape of the art world. The cycle of roles, institutions, internalization, and behavior influenced women artists before and during the feminist art movement, drawing parallels to Victor Rios' study in Punished. Before the feminist art movement, women in the art world were often hesitant to come forward due to the internalization of societal beliefs about their work being inferior. This internalization was not an overnight phenomenon, but the result of generations of societal and institutional messaging. Rio's study provides a useful analogy. Rios highlights a cycle of criminalization and victimization in inner-city communities, driven by the stigmatization and labeling by institutions like schools, police, and probation officers. This led to the creation of a self-defense mechanism that paradoxically led to more victimization and criminalization due to the internalization cycle, trapping individuals in a cycle perpetuated by societal and institutional biases. Translating this to the art world, women artists were caught in a similar cycle. The art institutions, galleries, museums, academia, perpetuated a narrative that women's art was secondary or inferior. This led to a self-perpetuating cycle. The lack of representation and recognition led to internalized belief among women that their work was indeed inferior, which in turn influenced their behavior, either by not pursuing art seriously or by conforming to the styles and themes deemed acceptable for women. However, with the creation of the feminist art movement, this cycle began to reverse. As feminist artists and activists started challenging the status quo, institutions slowly began to shift their perspectives. This shift was crucial. Just as Rios points out the importance of institutional support for breaking the cycle of criminalization and victimization, in the art world, institutional recognition and support played a key role in breaking the cycle of internalization. As galleries and museums started showcasing women's art, as academia began to include women's artists in their curricula, the narrative began to change. This change in institutional behavior led to a new cycle of internalization. Women artists began to see themselves as worthy and capable contributors to the art world. Their work was no longer automatically viewed as inferior, but was recognized and celebrated for its unique perspectives and qualities. The cycle Rios describes in Punished, roles leading to institutions, which then led to internalization and behavior, is mirrored here. However, in the case of the feminist art movement, the labels changed for the better. The social change led to a new form of internalization, one where women saw themselves as equal and integral parts of the world. I can connect the successes of the feminist art movement in changing social norms to the insights from the study Misperceived Social Norms by Alessandra Gonzalez, focusing on how misperceived norms and information provision played a role in both contexts. The feminist art movement's success was partially due to the shift in collective view of women in the art world. This shift was propelled by widespread dissemination of information and ideas that challenged the gender roles. The art community, prior to the movement, had not actively opposed the gender roles established and perpetuated by male-dominated structures, which could be seen as a reflection of misperceived social norms within the art world itself. Drawing a parallel with Gonzalez, just like in Saudi Arabia, where men privately supported women working outside the home, but underestimated other support, the art community may have had more latent support for women artists than was outwardly acknowledged. This underestimation of support likely contributed to the maintenance of traditional gender roles and the marginalization of women artists. Key successes of the movement included challenging and deconstructing traditional gender roles, offering alternative narratives through women's art, and creating supportive communities for women artists. These successes were akin to the outcomes observed in the Saudi Arabian study, where connecting misperceptions about social norms led to tangible changes in behavior, men allowing their wives to search for jobs and women choosing higher-paying jobs outside the home. As the feminist art movement gained momentum and information about women's contributions and capabilities in the art realm became more publicized, these misperceived norms began to change. The movement's effort in raising awareness through exhibitions, publications, and public discourse played a critical role in reshaping perceptions and attitudes within the art community. The movement, by providing a platform for women's artistic expression and challenging male-dominated narratives in art history, also contributed to educational reform. This was crucial in changing future socialization patterns, similar to how information provision in the study led to a change in behaviors regarding women working outside the home. The feminist art movement's success in changing gender norms in the art world can be attributed to its ability to challenge and correct misperceived social norms. By spreading information and changing perceptions, the movement not only empowered women artists, but also reshaped collective understanding of women's role and value in the art world. In conclusion, our journey through the transformative era of the 1970s feminist art movement reveals a powerful narrative of collective action, societal change, and the dismantling of long-standing gender norms. This movement was not merely about art. It was a profound statement against the entrenched inequalities with the art world and beyond. The feminist art movement arose as a response to a world sunken in male dominance and gender stereotypes, where women artists were marginalized and their contributions undervalued. This imbalance was a direct result of societal norms and the process of socialization that perpetuated gender disparities. This movement was not just about creating art. It was about rewriting history, reshaping societal norms, and empowering future generations. The legacy of the feminist art movement of the 1970s continues to inspire and influence the art world and beyond, demonstrating the enduring power of collective action and the pursuit of equality.